Welcome to HFY Stories. If you're ready for jaw-dropping stories and a universe full of excitement, hit that subscribe button like it's the big red button in a space opera. Give us a like if you're feeling that interstellar vibe and comment below to join the conversation. We want to hear from you. Yes, you, the spacefarer with a great story idea or just a fan of epic human victories. The call for aid. In the vastness of space, the galaxy had always known relative peace. Various species, each with their strengths, coexisted in a fragile harmony maintained by an unspoken agreement, never provoked the unknown. The humans, relatively new to the galactic community, had always been seen as curious but non-threatening, until now. The call for help came from the Zanari, an ancient and revered race known for their wisdom and advanced technology. They were under attack by an unknown force, a fleet of terrifying power and relentless aggression. The Zanari had never encountered such ferocity before and knew they couldn't win alone. Desperation led them to seek help from the Galactic Council, a coalition of the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. But the Council was paralyzed by fear, uncertain of how to combat this new threat. The Zanari had no choice but to turn to humanity, a race that had only recently joined the Council and was still seen as inexperienced and unproven. Humanity's response was swift, but not what anyone expected. The humans offered to deploy their fleet, but to the shock of the Zanari, they sent what was clearly their weakest armada, a fleet of aging ships with outdated technology and crewed by inexperienced officers. The Zanari were stunned. Did humanity not understand the gravity of the situation, or was this some kind of cruel joke? As the Zanari delegation stood in the command center of their capital ship, watching the arrival of the human fleet, they felt a mixture of anger and despair. The ships, though well-maintained, were clearly old models, their hulls bearing the scars of previous battles. The crew looked young and untested, their uniforms crisp but their eyes lacking the hardened resolve of seasoned warriors. Zanari Commander Thalkesh, a figure of authority and respect among his people, turned to the human envoy, Captain Alina Reyes. "Is this truly what humanity offers in our hour of need?" His voice was laced with disappointment. "We expected more." Captain Reyes, a woman of striking confidence, met his gaze without flinching. "Commander Thalkesh, I assure you, our fleet may not appear formidable, but it is more than capable. Our strength lies not in the technology of our ships, but in the spirit of our people." Thalkesh's expression hardened. "Spirit alone will not stop this enemy, Captain. We need weapons, power, experience, things your fleet clearly lacks." Reyes smiled faintly. "Perhaps, but we humans have a saying. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. You'll see soon enough." As the Zanari prepared to engage the enemy fleet, doubts lingered in their minds. They had placed their trust in the humans, but that trust now seemed misplaced. However, with no other options, they had no choice but to proceed. The enemy fleet emerged from hyperspace, their ships sleek and ominous, bristling with weaponry. They outnumbered the Zanari and human forces 2-1. The Zanari braced for the worst, expecting to be overrun in mere moments. But then, something unexpected happened. The human fleet, instead of engaging the enemy head-on, began to maneuver in a pattern that seemed erratic and disorganized. The Zanari watched in confusion as the human ships weaved through the battlefield, their movements unpredictable. "What are they doing?" Thalkesh muttered under his breath. Captain Reyes's voice cut through the tension. "They're leading the enemy into a trap." Before Thalkesh could respond, the human ships unleashed a barrage of electronic countermeasures, jamming the enemy's sensors and communications. The alien fleet, thrown into disarray, struggled to maintain formation. Then, with precision that belied their earlier disorganization, the human ships struck. They targeted weak points in the enemy's defenses, exploiting gaps that no one else had seen. The battle that followed was fierce, But the human fleet, though seemingly outmatched, fought with a tenacity that took the enemy by surprise. The Zanari, inspired by the humans' unexpected effectiveness, rallied and joined the fight with renewed vigor. As the tide began to turn, Thalkesh found himself re-evaluating his opinion of humanity. Perhaps there was more to these humans than met the eye. But even as victory seemed within reach, a new challenge emerged. One that would test the humans' resolve to its limits and reveal the true strength of their spirit. The hidden threat. The battlefield was a chaotic dance of fire and metal. But against all odds, the human fleet held its own. The Zanari watched in awe as the supposedly weak and outdated ships maneuvered with uncanny precision, their tactics outsmarting the enemy at every turn. Captain Elena Reyes' leadership was nothing short of remarkable. Her calm, calculated orders guided her crew through the chaos, turning what should have been a slaughter into a surprising victory. But just as the last of the enemy ships began to retreat, a sudden energy surge rippled through the battlefield. The lights on the human and Zanari ships flickered as systems faltered momentarily. Thalkesh's heart sank. This wasn't over yet. "What's happening?" Thalkesh demanded, turning to his officers. Captain Rice's voice came through the comms, steady but laced with urgency. "Commander, we're picking up a massive energy signature from the enemy's flagship. It's unlike anything we've seen before." On the view screens, the enemy flagship, a massive, ominous vessel that had remained at the rear of the battle, began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. The other enemy ships, now retreating, seemed to converge on it, forming a protective barrier. "It's a weapon," Reyes continued. "Something big. We need to stop it before it fully charges." Thalkesh's tactical officer analyzed the readings, his face growing pale. "Commander, the energy readings are off the charts. If that weapon fires, it could wipe out our entire fleet." Panic threatened to spread through the Zanari ranks, but Thalkesh fought to maintain control. "All ships, prepare for evasive maneuvers. Focus fire on the flagship. Take it down before it can fire." But Reyes cut in again. "Commander, if we attack now, we might just trigger an early discharge. We need a different approach." Thalkesh clenched his fists. "What do you propose, Captain? We don't have time." There was a brief silence. Then Reyes spoke, her tone resolute. "I'll lead a strike team to board the flagship. We'll disable the weapon from inside." Thalkesh stared at the screen in disbelief. "Are you mad? That ship is swarming with enemy forces. It's a suicide mission." Reyes' eyes met his through the comms, her expression unwavering. "It's our only chance. My team is ready." Before Thalkesh could argue further, Reyes had already begun preparations. The human strike team, consisting of elite soldiers and engineers, quickly assembled in the hangar bay of the lead ship. Among them was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, a brilliant engineer known for his unorthodox problem-solving skills. He had been handpicked by Reyes for this mission, and despite the grim odds, he wore a determined look. As the strike team's shuttle launched towards the enemy flagship, Thalkesh could only watch, a mix of admiration and fear coursing through him. These humans, with their unyielding spirit and willingness to take risks, were unlike any other species he had encountered. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he had sent them to their deaths. The shuttle raced towards the flagship, dodging enemy fire with agile maneuvers. The Zanari fleet provided covering fire, keeping the enemy's defenses occupied as the shuttle made its approach. Inside the cramped confines, Reyes briefed her team on the plan. "We'll dock in a maintenance bay near the weapon's core," she explained, her voice calm and authoritative. "Hale, you'll lead the effort to disable the weapon. The rest of us will cover you and hold off any hostiles." Hale nodded, his mind already racing with calculations and contingencies. This was the most dangerous mission he had ever undertaken, but he knew there was no room for doubt. The fate of the fleet, and possibly the entire galaxy, depended on their success. The shuttle shuddered as it docked with the enemy ship. The team moved swiftly, breaching the airlock and stepping into the dark, oppressive corridors of the flagship. The atmosphere was tense, every shadow a potential threat. Rise led the way, her senses alert to any sign of danger. As they made their way towards the weapons core, the team encountered sporadic resistance. Enemy soldiers who were quickly neutralized by the humans' superior tactics and coordination. But the deeper they went, the more oppressive the environment became. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of twisted metal and strange, pulsating energy conduits that seemed almost alive. Finally, they reached the core chamber. The weapon was a massive, ominous structure, its power emanating in waves that made the air hum with energy. Hale immediately set to work, his hands moving with practiced speed as he connected to the alien systems, attempting to override the weapon's controls. But it wasn't going to be easy. The technology was unlike anything Hale had ever seen, complex, advanced, and resistant to his every attempt to disable it. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he fought against the clock, knowing that every second brought them closer to annihilation. Outside, the enemy fleet, sensing the humans' plan, intensified their assault on the Zanari and human forces. The flagship's weapon continued to charge, its glow growing more intense, casting an eerie light through the flagship's corridors. Rise and her team held the line, repelling waves of enemy soldiers who seemed determined to stop them at any cost. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the threat of impending doom. But despite the odds, the humans fought on with unwavering resolve. And then, just as it seemed like all hope was lost, Hale found a vulnerability in the weapons system, a small, overlooked flaw that could be exploited. With a final, desperate effort, he initiated the override, rerouting the weapon's power into a feedback loop that would render it inert. The weapon's glow faltered, then dimmed, and finally went dark. The team breathed a collective sigh of relief, but it was short-lived. The feedback loop had destabilized the flagship's power core, triggering a countdown to self-destruction. Time to go, Ray shouted, and the team raced back towards their shuttle, the ship's alarms blaring around them. They'd barely made it back to the shuttle in time, launching into space just as the flagship began to tear itself apart in a violent explosion. Back on the Zanari capital ship, Thelkesh watched in awe as the enemy flagship was engulfed in flames. The remaining enemy forces, demoralized by the loss of their leader and weapon, began to retreat in disarray. The battle was won, but at a great cost. As the human shuttle docked with their ship, the crew erupted in cheers. Rise and her team were hailed as heroes, their bravery and ingenuity saving not just the Zanari, but potentially the entire galaxy from a terrifying new threat. But as the dust settled, new questions emerged. Who were these enemies, and why had they attacked? And more importantly, what else were they hiding? The victory had come at a price, and it was clear that this was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. The enemy revealed. The aftermath of the battle left a somber atmosphere aboard both the human and Zanari ships. Despite the victory, the sense of unease only grew. The enemy had retreated, but the questions they left behind were as ominous as the battle itself. Who were they? Why had they attacked? And what could drive such a powerful force to invade the Zanari so ruthlessly? Captain Elena Reyes found herself back in the Zanari capital ship's command center, facing Commander Thelkesh. The relief of survival was overshadowed by the grim reality that more battles lay ahead. Thelkesh, once skeptical of humanity's capabilities, now regarded Rise with a newfound respect, though his concerns were far from eased. Captain Rise, Thelkesh began, his tone grave, I owe you and your crew an apology. I underestimated you, and for that, I'm grateful to have been proven wrong. But we cannot afford to be complacent. The enemy we face today, they're unlike anything the galaxy has seen. Reyes nodded. We need to understand who they are and what they want. My team managed to gather some data during the mission. With your permission, I'd like to review it with your intelligence officers. Falkesh gestured to his lead analyst, a sharp-minded Zanari named Lyurka. She had been studying the enemy's tactics and technology since the battle began, and now, with the data Rise provided, she was ready to dig deeper. As the data was projected onto the command center's holoscreen, the room fell silent. The analysis revealed information that sent chills down the spines of everyone present. The enemy ships bore markings and designs that were ancient, far older than anything in the known galactic archives. Yet, their technology was cutting edge, far surpassing that of any current civilization. These ships, they're from a civilization that should be long dead, Lurka said, her voice tinged with disbelief. We're looking at relics from the Selen Empire, a race that was supposedly wiped out over 10,000 years ago in a cataclysmic event. No one has seen or heard from them since. Falkesh's eyes widened. The Selen Empire? That's impossible. They were destroyed, their planets rendered lifeless. How could they be here now? Reyes leaned in, her expression hardening. Maybe they weren't destroyed. Maybe they were hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike. Or perhaps, something brought them back. The room fell into a tense silence as the implications of her words sank in. If the Selen Empire had somehow returned, it meant that the galaxy was facing an ancient enemy with knowledge and technology far beyond their own. And worse, the Selens were known not just for their power, but for their ruthless ambition. They had once sought to dominate the galaxy, and it seemed they were ready to try again. We need more information, Ray said, breaking the silence. If they've been hiding for all these millennia, there must be a reason why they've chosen to reveal themselves now. We need to find out what their plan is. Lurka nodded. There's something else. The weapon we encountered. It was designed for more than just destruction. It was a prototype, an experimental weapon designed to harness an energy source we don't fully understand yet. It's possible that they were testing it, and we were the targets. Race's mind raced. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but the picture they formed was terrifying. The Selens weren't just back. They were testing new weapons, refining their tactics, and probing the galaxy's defenses. This battle had been a test run, and the humans and Zanari had barely survived. We can't just sit and wait for them to strike again, Rai said, her voice firm. We need to go on the offensive. If they're testing weapons, they'll have a base, a research facility, somewhere we can hit them where it hurts. We need to find it and take it out before they can perfect whatever it is they're working on. Falkesh agreed. But we'll need more than just your fleet. We'll need the support of the Galactic Council. They must be made aware of the threat. Reyes frowned. The Council was hesitant to act even when the Zanari called for help. That won't be easy to convince. But if we can present undeniable proof of the Selens' return, they'll have no choice but to act. Lurka quickly compiled a report from the data, emphasizing the unique energy signatures and the ancient origins of the enemy ships. With this evidence, Reyes and Falkesh prepared to make their case to the Council. The fate of the galaxy hinged on convincing the most powerful civilizations to unite against this ancient threat. Before leaving, Reyes took a moment to check in with her crew. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, the engineer who had disabled the weapon, was recovering from the intense mission. Reyes found him in the medbay, bandaged but in good spirits. You did good work out there, Hale, Reyes said, sitting beside him. Hale chuckled, though his exhaustion was evident. Just doing my job, Captain. But something about that weapon, it didn't feel right. It was almost like it was alive. Reyes looked at him, puzzled. Alive? Hale nodded slowly. I can't explain it, but as I was working on disabling it, I felt like it was resisting me, like it knew what I was trying to do. It wasn't just a machine. It was something more. Reyes considered his words carefully. If the Selens had developed technology that was somehow sentient or self-aware, it added a new layer of danger to their return. They were facing not just an ancient enemy, but one that had evolved in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. As the fleet prepared to leave for the Galactic Council, Rise couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The Cylons were back, and they were stronger than ever. The humans and Zanari had won a battle, but the war was just beginning, and it was a war that would require the entire galaxy to stand united or face certain extinction. The Council's decision. Captain Elena Rise and Commander Thelkesh stood before the Galactic Council, a massive assembly of representatives from the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The chamber was an awe-inspiring sight, filled with beings of various forms, colors, and sizes, each seated in their respective alcoves. The Council's circular chamber, with its high ceilings and holographic displays, hummed with a quiet intensity as the delegates reviewed the evidence presented to them. Rise could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, others skeptical. The Council had always viewed humans as newcomers, a race with potential but still untested in the grander schemes of galactic politics. Thelkesh, on the other hand, commanded respect as a leader of the Zanari, but even his influence was not enough to guarantee the Council's support. They needed to be convinced that the Cylons were not just an old legend, but a real and imminent threat. The head of the Council, a towering Avarican with silver scales and a regal bearing, called the session to order. His voice resonated through the chamber with authority. Captain Rise, Commander Thelkesh, you have brought us disturbing reports of an ancient enemy. We have reviewed the data you provided, but it is difficult to accept that the Cylon Empire has returned. The last remnants of their civilization were destroyed millennia ago. How can we be sure this isn't a case of misidentification? Ray stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. Honorable Councillors, the data doesn't lie. We've encountered ships with markings and technology that can only belong to the Cylons. More than that, we fought against them. Their tactics, their weaponry, everything points to a civilization that has not only survived, but has been preparing for this moment. Thelkesh added his voice to hers. Our forces barely managed to repel their initial attack. If not for the courage and ingenuity of Captain Rise and her crew, the Zanari would have been overrun. The Cylons are not just a threat to one race or one planet. If we don't act now, they will unleash their full might on the galaxy. The councillors exchanged uneasy glances. The evidence was compelling, but fear of a confrontation with an enemy as powerful as the Cylons ran deep. The Council had always prioritized diplomacy and containment over direct military engagement, and the idea of mobilizing the entire galaxy for war was a daunting prospect. One of the councillors, a stoic Grathian with cold, calculating eyes, spoke up. Even if we accept that the Cylons have returned, why should we believe that this is not just an isolated incident? What proof do you have that they pose a threat to the entire galaxy? Reyes anticipated this question. She signaled to Lurka, who activated the holoscreen, displaying a map of the galaxy with several highlighted points. We intercepted communications during the battle, Reyes explained. These points represent potential targets that match the patterns we found in their data. The Cylons aren't just testing us. They're probing for weaknesses, planning a coordinated strike across multiple sectors. If we don't stop them now, they will hit us where it hurts the most. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the Cylons were truly planning a large-scale invasion, the galaxy could be plunged into a war unlike anything it had seen in thousands of years. The delegates began to murmur amongst themselves, weighing the risks of inaction against the cost of war. Finally, the Avarican leader raised a hand for silence. This council has always sought to maintain peace and stability in the galaxy. But we cannot ignore the evidence before us. If the Cylons have indeed returned, and if they pose the threat you claim, then we must prepare for the worst. However, mobilizing our fleets will take time and resources. We need further proof, something irrefutable. Race's heart sank slightly. She knew the council would be cautious, but time was not on their side. The Cellans were moving quickly, and every moment spent debating was a moment they could not afford to lose. But Thalkesh stepped forward with a solution. There is a way to get the proof you need. Our intelligence has identified a facility on the outskirts of Zanari space, a remote outpost that may be a staging ground for the Cellans' operations. If we can infiltrate it and retrieve their plans, we can present undeniable evidence to the Council. The Grathian counselor narrowed his eyes. Infiltration. That sounds dangerously close to an act of war. Thalkesh met his gaze evenly. The Cellans have already declared war on us by their actions. This is a necessary step to prevent a greater conflict. I propose a joint operation, Zanari and human forces working together to secure the data we need. The Avarican leader considered this, his silver eyes reflecting the glow of the holoscreen. After a moment he nodded. Very well. We will authorize a covert operation to retrieve this data. If successful, we will mobilize the full force of the Galactic Council to meet this threat head-on. But be warned, if this mission fails, or if the evidence is insufficient, we may be forced to reconsider our involvement. Raiz and Thalkesh exchanged a glance. The mission would be dangerous, but it was their best chance to secure the galaxy's future. Raiz knew her crew was ready for the challenge, but the stakes had never been higher. The fate of countless worlds rested on their shoulders. As they left the council chamber, Raiz found herself walking alongside Thalkesh. The tension between them from their first meeting had dissolved, replaced by mutual respect and a shared sense of purpose. "You were right about your people, Captain," Thalkesh said quietly. "Your fleet may not have been the most powerful, but your spirit is something the Cellans did not anticipate. It may be the key to our survival." Raiz smiled faintly. "We've always had to punch above our weight. It's how we've survived. But this is something else entirely. If we're going to win, we'll need more than just spirit." Thalkesh nodded. "We'll need unity. The entire galaxy standing together against a common enemy. And it starts with us." As they prepared for the mission, Raiz couldn't help but think of the long road ahead. The Cellans were powerful, ancient, and relentless. But humanity, alongside their allies, had something the Cellans didn't: hope. And as long as they held on to that, there was a chance, however slim, that they could prevail. The Joint Task Force assembled quickly, a blend of human and Zanari soldiers and specialists. Among them was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, still recovering from his previous injuries but insistent on being part of the mission. The outpost they were targeting was deep within uncharted space, far from any known trade routes or inhabited systems. A perfect location for the Cellans to operate in secrecy. The journey was tense, the silence of space mirroring the quiet determination of the crew. As they approached the outpost, the true scale of the Cellans' operations became clear. The facility was massive, a sprawling complex of interlinked stations and shipyards, all bustling with activity. This was no mere outpost. It was a fully operational base, the heart of their resurgence. The mission was clear: infiltrate, retrieve the data, and get out before the Cellans realized they were there. But as they prepared to breach the facility's defenses, Raiz couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The Cellans were too quiet, too confident. It was as if they were waiting for them. And then, as the team made their move, the trap was sprung. Alarms blared, and the outpost came alive with hostile forces. The Cellans had known they were coming, and now, the Joint Task Force was trapped deep within enemy territory, outnumbered and outgunned. The mission had just become a fight for survival. The final stand. The Cellan outpost erupted in a cacophony of alarms and flashing lights as the human and Zanari Joint Task Force found themselves surrounded. What had been planned as a stealth mission had now turned into a desperate battle for survival. Captain Elena Raiz stood at the forefront, her eyes scanning the chaotic scene as her team scrambled for cover. "Get to the data core," Raiz shouted over the comms, her voice cutting through the noise. We need that intel, or everything we fought for will be for nothing. Lieutenant Marcus Hale, still recovering from his injuries, pushed himself forward, his mind focused on the task at hand. The data core was their objective, the heart of the Cylon outpost, containing the information they needed to prove the Cylon threat to the Galactic Council. But reaching it would not be easy. The Cylons poured out from every corner of the station, their soldiers clad in dark, sleek armor that seemed to blend into the shadows. They moved with precision and discipline, clearly well prepared for the attack. Energy weapons fired from all directions, creating a deadly web of beams that the task force had to navigate. Reyes led the charge, her blaster rifle barking out shots as she advanced through the narrow corridors. Felkesh was at her side, his own weapon firing with deadly accuracy. Despite the dire situation, the Zanari commander had remained calm and focused, his experience in battle shining through. "Cover Hale," Reyes ordered as they reached a junction. "We need to buy him time to break through the security." Hale quickly ducked behind a console, his hands moving rapidly over the alien controls. The Cylon systems were unlike anything he had encountered before, ancient yet sophisticated, with layers of encryption designed to keep out even the most determined intruders. But Hale was determined, his mind racing as he worked to bypass the security protocols. Meanwhile, the rest of the team fought to hold the line. Zanari soldiers, with their superior physical strength and agility, clashed with the Cylon forces in close combat, while the humans provided cover fire. The corridor echoed with the sounds of battle, but for every Cylon that fell, it seemed two more took their place. Razor's heart pounded as she fought to keep the team together. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the enemy showed no signs of relenting. The Cylons fought with a cold, calculated efficiency, as if they were testing the humans and Zanari, gauging their strength and tactics. "We can't hold them off much longer," Felkesh shouted, his voice strained as he fired at an advancing squad of Cylons. Hale's hands flew over the controls, his breathing shallow as he fought against the clock. Almost there, just a little more time. But time was something they didn't have. The Cylons were closing in, their relentless assault pushing the task force back. Reyes knew they were on the brink of being overwhelmed, but she refused to give up. She had come too far, fought too hard, to let it all end here. Then, just as the situation seemed hopeless, the station shuddered violently, the lights flickering as a massive explosion rocked the outpost. Reyes looked up, her heart skipping a beat. The explosion hadn't come from their side, something else was happening. "Captain, look," one of the Zanari soldiers shouted, pointing to the nearest viewport. Outside, the void of space was suddenly filled with the unmistakable shapes of starships. Dozens of them, bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council. The Council had sent reinforcements, answering the call for help. Massive battleships and swift fighter squadrons engaged the Cylon fleet, cutting through their ranks with devastating precision. The Cylons were caught off guard, their forces now split between dealing with the intruders inside their base and the onslaught from outside. It was the break the task force needed. "Hale, we've got to move," Reyes yelled, grabbing the lieutenant by the shoulder. Hale nodded, his face set in determination. "I've got it. The data is ours." With the data core's encryption finally broken, Hale transferred the files to a portable drive. Reyes quickly signaled the team to fall back, their mission now complete. But the battle was far from over. They still had to escape the outpost and make it back to their ships. As they raced through the corridors, the sounds of battle grew louder. The Council's forces were making their presence felt, pounding the Cylon defenses from all sides. Reyes and her team moved quickly, dodging debris and stray shots as they made their way to the hangar. The hangar was a scene of chaos, with ships and shuttles scrambling to take off. The Cylons were in full retreat, their carefully laid plans unraveling in the face of the Council's unexpected assault. Reyes spotted their extraction shuttle, its engines already fired up and ready to go. Move, 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 Rise urged, her voice barely audible over the roar of engines. The team piled into the shuttle, and Rise was the last to board, firing one last shot at a pursuing Cylon before the hatch sealed shut. The shuttle's pilot didn't wait for orders. He slammed the throttle, and the ship rocketed out of the hangar, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. As the shuttle cleared the station, Rise looked out the viewport at the battle raging in space. The Cylon fleet, once so imposing, was now in disarray. The Council's forces had the upper hand, their coordinated assault overwhelming the Cylon ships. It was a stunning reversal, one that Rise hadn't expected, but it was exactly what they needed. Rise turned to Thalkesh, who was catching his breath beside her. Looks like the Council came through after all. Thalkesh gave a weary smile. Perhaps they were more convinced by our actions than our words. As the shuttle made its way back to the Zanari capital ship, Rise allowed herself a moment of relief. They had done it. They had the evidence they needed, and the Council had seen the threat with their own eyes. The Cylons had been stopped, at least for now. But as she looked at the data core in Hale's hands, Rise knew this was just the beginning. The Cylons were far from defeated. They had been preparing for millennia, and this setback would only make them more dangerous. The galaxy had a long, hard fight ahead. Back on the capital ship, Rise and Thalkesh were greeted with applause as they entered the command center. The mood was jubilant. The enemy had been driven back, and the mission was a success. But Rise couldn't shake the feeling of unease. As they plugged the data core into the main computer, the room fell silent, everyone watching as the files decrypted. The information revealed a chilling picture, detailed plans for future attacks, blueprints for even more powerful weapons, and the location of hidden Cylon bases scattered across the galaxy. "This is worse than we thought," Thalkesh muttered, scanning the data. "The Cylons aren't just planning a war, they're preparing for total domination." Rise nodded grimly. They've been biding their time, waiting for the right moment. And now that they've shown their hand, we have to be ready for whatever comes next. The Council convened a special session the following day, this time with the full weight of the evidence laid before them. There was no more doubt. The Cylons were back, and they were a threat to every living being in the galaxy. The Council voted unanimously to mobilize all available forces to counter the Cylon resurgence. As the Council's fleets gathered, Rise and her crew were given a moment of respite. They had survived the impossible, and their actions had united the galaxy in a way that had never been seen before. But they knew the hardest battles were yet to come. In the quiet moments before the next mission, Rise found herself staring out at the stars, thinking about what lay ahead. The Cylons were ancient, powerful, and relentless. But humanity, with its allies, had something the Cylons could never understand: hope, determination, and the will to fight for a future worth living. As the fleets prepared for war, Rise knew they would face unimaginable challenges. But she also knew that together, they could overcome anything. The galaxy had been given a chance to fight back, and they wouldn't waste it. The final battle was coming, and this time, humanity wouldn't be fighting alone. The end.